The Toronto 18, a group of young Canadians accused of planning their own version of 9/11 on September 11, 2006. Only now are the details coming to light. Here's Drew Griffin of CNN's Special Investigations Unit.
Investigators say this is the devastation their bomb would have caused. The aim, kill as many Canadians as possible. The target, downtown Toronto.
3 buildings, 3 bombs, all right here in the heart of downtown Toronto, and all to go off almost simultaneously using one cell phone.
It would have been that same phone. Probably would have been 3 different numbers, and so the time it takes to dial 3 numbers.
Mubin Sheikh was the mole on the inside, a paid informant of Canadian police. And this was the so-called ringleader of the conspiracy. His name is Zakaria Amara, seen here on police evidence tape, testing a cell phone-triggered detonator.
He wanted to do it around 9/11. He wanted it to have the maximum effect on the Canadian psyche and the public psyche. And that is where the strength of terrorism lies.
Sheikh, a Muslim youth director in Toronto, infiltrated the group that he calls high school friends who played soccer together and hung out at after-school Muslim youth groups. Sheikh says they also began looking at perceived injustice towards Muslims around the world and literally self-radicalized.
And some have termed them jihadists because it becomes it's a hobby. They're online, they're checking all this stuff out, and then it's a cause for celebration when one of them actually goes and does something.
For Toronto's police chief, Bill Blair, how this plot started and then became more serious is the new and growing threat of terror.
It's one thing to keep a threat outside your borders. It's another to realize that that threat can germinate and grow inside your borders and inside your own communities.
What prevented catastrophe 3 years ago was inside information, allowing Sheikh to penetrate the group, actually going on these training missions. Some of the suspects were caught on tape, buying what they thought was enough ammonium nitrate to make 3 one-ton bombs. This test explosion of a real bomb by police played in court showed a jury what the chief says was the real intent, to kill Canadians.
And you don't say that lightly. They could have killed thousands.
The detonators that had been obtained worked. Had they been able to obtain the chemicals, all of the chemicals that they were trying to obtain, had they been able to detonate that in the city of Toronto, thousands of citizens would have been killed.
What may surprise you even more than the plot to kill thousands of Canadians is the punishment handed down for trying to pull it off.
Of the 2 conspirators seen loading and unloading what they thought was ammonium nitrate, one got a 14-year prison sentence but can apply for parole in just 2.5 years. The other will be sentenced in January. Zakaria Amara, the mastermind who was fine-tuning his cell phone triggers, has pled guilty and faces a sentence next month of up to life in prison, but in Canada, life means 25 years, with a possibility for parole after serving just 15. One of those convicted is already free, and charges against 7 others were either dropped or stayed. Toronto's police chief doesn't believe the punishments fit the crime.
The police always want a greater sentence to reflect the abhorrence we have to such crime. I think this is a very real plot. Had they been successful, they could have killed thousands of citizens in the city.
Now many are back on the streets with no guarantees for the future.
All right, so 2 questions. Why such light sentences? I mean, we're talking about thousands of people potentially.
And these people thought they were going to pull it off. One problem is, well, not a problem, but there's a difference between Canadian law and U.S. law, which we're seeing today with sentencing here in Atlanta for 2 terrorists. But the other part of this is police in Toronto did such a good job that I think they had a hard time convincing anybody that these plotters were actually going to do this. In other words, they were on the inside trying to make sure this wasn't going to happen, and they have outsmarted themselves in thinking that, well, the police were on this from the beginning, so this was not a serious threat. But as you heard from the police chief, very serious crime they were plotting.
And you've got some that are back on the street. So how
Right.
do you know that they're not going to commit any type of crime?
I talked with 2 people who have talked to those who are on the streets or about to be released. Kira, there's no guarantee. They're saying that they're not convinced their minds have been changed by the short stints they did in prison, or for the 7 who just walked, that they've gotten any punishment at all. So there really is a fear that this kind of thinking, this homegrown terroristic thinking, is still very fervent up there in Toronto.
I'll have to wait and see. Thanks, Drew.